Hello, Sourdough Mamas. This is Heather, and I'm really excited to be here today because gifting sourdough is a pretty hot topic over on the Sourdough Mamas Facebook group, and something that we all want to do, and something that a lot of us have done. So, I wanted to share a lot of information about gifting sourdough, about gifting starter, and the easiest ways to do that. Real quick, I wanted to give you a little update. There is a new sourdough course coming from Leavenly, so stay tuned for that. I am working on it. It's a video course, so it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of editing, and I have 3 kids and I'm constantly tired. So it might be a little later than I want it to be, but it's coming. It's in the works. So just keep your eyes peeled for that. And something else that's kind of crazy is that our daughter is finishing up her final week of pre-K this week, which is so crazy. She's starting kindergarten in the fall, and I wanted her to have a really fun kind of last summer, last hurrah kind of thing. So we signed her up for a couple of summer day camps that she's going to do through June, July, August. And then of course some weeks off, of course, just to spend time with us and hang out and have that quality time before she starts real school. So yeah, we're just looking forward to that, and it's a big shift for everybody, but we're excited for that. So any tips on having a kindergartner, I would very much appreciate. Um, Also, as an aside, we're going to redo the kids' rooms this summer. I didn't plan to mention this, but I love to crowdsource ideas. And so what we're doing is we're moving the boys into one room and Jojo, my daughter, into the other room. So she's going to have her own room. And the way that I envision it is having like a loft bed with a desk under it so she can go in there and do her homework right after school, and she has her own space and that kind of thing. So if anybody has suggestions for design ideas or great websites where they got great products or a great loft bed or different designs, colors, anything, I'm the worst interior decorator on the planet. So seriously, send those ideas over, and I'll I'll take all of the ideas I can get. Gosh, what else? We had a massive snowstorm this past weekend here in Colorado. It was kind of crazy. 2 days before that, it was in the 80s, really sunny, beautiful. All the flowers had bloomed, all the tree leaves are out. And then we get this really heavy, heavy snowfall. I mean, it started as rain. And so the snow was extremely heavy when it started. I think here where I live here in Golden, we had about 6 to 8 inches accumulate on the ground. And so a lot of it also melted when it first landed because it was still warm. So there were down tree branches everywhere. We didn't lose a lot, luckily, but some people did. And it was crazy. Our power went out for 8 hours overnight, and the kids' rooms were cold. So I didn't sleep. I was so stressed out about it. And then devastatingly, the Wi Fi was out all weekend, which obviously we survived. But if you have young kids, sometimes you need the Wi Fi. But we're all good. It was just kind of a shock, and it looks like I'm looking outside right now. It looks like all the flowers and the plants and everything have survived and they're recuperating and coming back. So that was very bizarre. I still have, if you're watching on YouTube, my bin of snow clothes behind me that I need to put away. I literally just put them away 2 weeks before we got this snowstorm. I was like, I'm sick of looking at all these snow pants. So I put them all away in the closet. And then, of course, I had to dig them out again. So go figure. So with all that being said, we got a lot going on, but I'm really excited to talk about the gifting starter and gifting sourdough with you guys. I think it's one of the nicest gestures you can do, especially gifting baked goods and especially sourdough. I think people really view sourdough as something that's really hard, and it's really amazing, and it's a really nice gift to get because it's not something that they would probably make for themselves unless they have a starter and they're making their own sourdough, in which case you probably wouldn't gift it to them. So it's always really, really appreciated. So we have a couple stories from some sourdough mamas. I have a bunch of stories of my own in this regard, and I'm sure you all have stories as well. So hop on the Sourdough Mamas Facebook group on Facebook. Obviously, the Facebook group is on Facebook, and share your gifting stories with us there. We would love to hear those. So let's start with talking about gifting starter. I think this is a good place to begin because, it's starter. And so some people really are interested in getting a starter, maintaining the starter, but they don't want to have to make it for themselves. They don't want to start a starter from scratch and go through all that heartache and all that frustration. which, by the way, doesn't need to be so hard, but people think that it is, and sometimes it can be challenging for sure. So gifting a starter is much easier. Receiving one from somebody is much easier than having to make one from scratch, especially if you have yours really well established. It's got a great, microbiome basically in that jar, and it's just a really great way to get them started with sourdough baking. There's a couple options with gifting starters. So you can either gift dried starter or you can gift it as your normal starter. So either way with starter, you should include instructions on how to feed it, because some people will get this jar and they're not going to have any clue what to do with it. And, you can tell them, but people forget, or you could scribble down some instructions and it might not make sense to them. So I took all the confusion out of that for you. I created some free downloadable printouts that you can access through the show notes of this episode on how to feed the starter. And also in a second, we're going to talk about gifting dried starter. There's also instructions on how to revive the starter. So those are instructions that people are going to need when you're gifting this sourdough starter to them. So head over to the show notes for this episode to find those. And the instructions are for giving a normal starter, so your wet, hydrated starter. The instructions are for for feeding 30 grams of starter. So you're going to want to gift them more than 30 grams. So just for a good rule of thumb, what I usually do is I gift 50 grams of my regular starter. And that way, because you're going to have some lost on the container, whatever it is you're gifting in. So you don't want to just give exactly 30 grams because they're not going to get that out of the container. So gift them a little bit more than they actually need. And some ideas for how to gift it. You can get as creative as you want to, or you can do as simple as you want to. So you can gift it in a small jar or just a regular mason jar. If you have some extras, you can reuse some food jars, or even in a Ziploc bag. I've done that before where I just literally will pour some of my starter into a snack baggie and I staple the instructions on the bag, and it doesn't look nice, but that's really all you need. You don't need to go crazy. And again, I'm busy, so that's the best that I could do at the time. And then other times I have taken the time to put it in jars. And so it really depends on your situation and what you have going on. But I collected right here, I don't know if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening, but I'll describe them. Just a couple of small jars that I found in my house. So this is a jar of red pesto from Target, which by the way is really, really yummy with tortellinis. We had that last night for dinner and it was really good. But this is a nice little jar. It's very squat and it has a black lid on it. So it has a pretty strong flavor. So you'd really have to make sure you wash that well, put it in the dishwasher maybe a couple of times to get the flavor out. Another one is this classic Bon Maman jam with the red and white lid. You can probably visualize that. This would be a really nice one to give some sourdough starter in. Or what you can do is use the tiny little jars. And this actually is a very small jar. It's maybe 3 inches in diameter across. And it's really pretty design. And I put some parchment paper on top and I just tied it with some kitchen twine. I wanted to tie it with some, what's the word? Oh my gosh. Is it twine that I'm trying to think of? The really rough rope? No, there's another word for that. I don't know why I can't think of this. It'll come to me, but I couldn't find mine. I have a huge roll of it somewhere in this house and I couldn't find it. So I just used my kitchen string. And this is actually my jar of dried sourdough starter. So you can see in there, if it ever focuses, there we go. There's actually dried starter in there. So that's what I would gift to somebody with or without the parchment. The parchment makes it look nice, but you totally don't have to. So it depends on the level of commitment that you want to do. If it's a birthday, anniversary, Christmas gift, you'll want to, amp it up a little bit. If you're just giving it to somebody as a gift because you thought of them, or if they ask for some, just do it in whatever way is easy. I wouldn't overthink it, but always include the instructions on how to feed that starter. And then if you want to dry it out before gifting it, there's a link in the show notes as well to how to dry your sourdough starter. So again, you would dry it into small little flakes. And this is really good. I keep this in my pantry. This is my backup starter in case something horrible happens to mine. And you should go do that right now. I think if you are listening to this podcast and you've heard all the episodes, you've probably heard me say this 100 times by now, but you need to go and dry your sourdough starter right now, because something will happen and you're going to wish that you had. So if you want to gift it dried, really all you have to do is this. You take some of your starter, don't even worry about how much it is, and get a cookie sheet, put on a Silpat, like the reusable silicone liners. That's what I use. Or you can just put down parchment paper and spread it as thin as possible across that surface. And you don't want any kind of hills. You want it all very uniform as you can and as thin as you possibly can. And then just leave it out to dry. You can cover it with a kitchen towel lightly, just make sure it doesn't touch the actual starter. You could put something in the center of the pan itself, of the cookie sheet, like maybe a tall glass or like a water bottle with a straw that's nice and tall, and you could drape the towel over that. It doesn't really matter if you get some on the bottom of your glass or your cup, no big deal, as long as the towel doesn't touch. Another good technique is to put it in the oven with your light on, and it makes a nice warm environment in there. Although I just heard recently that if you have a halogen light bulb in your oven, that it could heat as high as 150 degrees Fahrenheit in that oven just with the light bulb on. So we don't want that. That would be bad news for a starter. It doesn't like that heat, and it probably would die. So not advisable. If you're not sure if it's a halogen light, one thing I would recommend is just turn the light on, leave it on for an hour or two, close the oven door, and then take a meat thermometer and just place it on the rack and turn it on and see what temperature you have inside your oven. Or even better, if you have an oven thermometer, obviously that would work better, but most people don't have an oven thermometer. So stick your meat thermometer in there and see how warm your oven is. That's a great way to dry it out. Or just move to Colorado, where it's usually 5 to 20% humidity, and it'll dry within 2 days just sitting on the counter. So that's a really easy idea, especially if you don't live here. My dad the other day said that in Colorado Springs, the humidity was 2%. This is obviously before the snowstorm, but I was complaining about how dry it was, and he beat me. Yeah, we were at about 15% here in Golden, and he was 2%. So that was a little aside, but it's very dry here. So you want to dry out your starter. You want to make sure that it's very, very dry throughout. If you see any dark spots throughout, it's not fully dry, and you need to let it dry completely before you crumble it up and put it in a container. Because if there's any amount of moisture in there, it will grow mold and it won't be any good. So there's instructions for that, basically what I just told you, but in a longer form and with pictures. There's instructions for that in the show notes. So definitely check that out if you're interested in drying your starter for yourself and to gift. I recommend doing both, even having some dried starter on hand so you can hand it out to people as they request it or as you see fit. That's a great idea too. So if you're drying some out anyway, you might as well dry out 2 sheets full and crumble it up, and then you'll have a whole bunch. Just some food for thought. And you can gift it the exact same way. So in a jar like this, in a Ziploc bag, whichever is the easiest thing works great. A little plastic Tupperware container is also good. There's a free printout for this method as well that you should check out in the show notes. It includes instructions on how to feed the starter, just like above, but it also includes instructions on how to revive the dried starter. So that's important if somebody who's never had sourdough before gets a jar with some flakes in it and they're thinking, what do I do with this? Do I just add water? How do I make it alive? So it's important to know that. So make sure you download the appropriate instructions for whichever type of starter that you're gifting. And again, the instructions are for reviving 30 grams of dried starter. So in that case, you could just give 30 grams because obviously you're going to be able to get all of that out. You're not going to lose any on the sides or anything like that. A sourdough mama on the Sourdough Mamas group shared, her name was Raelle, and she said that she gifted dried starter so that her friend could begin when they were ready. So that's a really good idea. There's no pressure because some people, they might think that they're ready, and really it does take some level of commitment in your mind to be ready to start feeding a sourdough starter all the time, to bake sourdough. So a dried starter is a really great idea for that reason. And I liked that she shared that information because it's just something that I hadn't really thought of before. It's more, for me, it's more of a convenience for me to share dried starter, but it's good for the receiver if they're not quite ready. And a nice idea for gifting it again is to reuse those jars. So I have a ton of mason jars, but I actually don't reuse jars too much, mostly because my husband complains that I'm a jar hoarder. This has been a small source of contention in our marriage. Obviously very minor, but it's kind of funny. I will keep any and all containers. If I'll hold up a box, like if it's a solid like cardboard box and I think it could be useful, I'll hold it up and I'll say, hey, do you think we can use this for anything? And he just rolls his eyes. So I'm like, okay, I'll just put it in the recycling. So it's something I'm working on. So I don't have a lot of reused jars anymore, mostly because I have a ton of mason jars. So again, if you collect those, that's a really great idea. And so who do you want to gift sourdough starter to? It needs to be someone who is interested in baking sourdough or making discard recipes. Okay, you can't just like go to your friend at, your social club and say, hey, here's some starter. Like, I was thinking of you, here you go. Your friend's going to be like, first of all, what the heck is this? Why do I want it? What am I going to do with it? I don't bake. So, that's not a good idea. You want to make sure that they're interested in it. So here's some ideas. Family and friends, obviously, you're going to know those people who are interested in sourdough baking, and Facebook groups as well. Local groups on Facebook. Nextdoor is a great way to do it too. If you're on Nextdoor, you could search for sourdough and see if anyone's asking for sourdough starter, or just post, hey, neighbors, I have some sourdough starter. Does anybody want some? And I suspect you'll get a handful of people coming over for some of your starter. Teachers at school, it's a good gift for teachers if they're interested in it, and somebody at church. So one thing that I did recently is I gifted some hydrated starter to a lady at church named Sandy. She's a very hardworking woman there. She does a ton. And she found out that I have the Sourdough podcast, the Sourdough Mamas podcast, and the Sourdough group, and Leavenly. And she got really excited and she talked to me at length about sourdough, of course. And I was happy to talk with her about that. And she said that she would love some starter. And I said, I'll just bring you some. No big deal. And she's like, oh my gosh. And so the next week I brought her a jar of hydrated starter. And that's actually where these instructions that you can download, that's where these came from. I sat down and I made a really nice instruction sheet. And because I thought it would be nice to add to the gift visually as well as very useful. So I kind of based this template on Sandy's starter. And so I gave that to her. I haven't checked in with her if she's baked sourdough yet. I'll have to find her and ask her. But she was really excited. She was so thrilled. And then as I was leaving, I heard her telling a group of people about the sourdough baking that she wants to do and how she found out that I make sourdough. So she was just so happy, and I was thrilled. On Sourdough Mamas Facebook group, Stephanie shared that she said a couple times I've offered starter plus my favorite recipes and a few tips on our neighborhood buy nothing site. I've easily had 15 people come by to pick it up. Some people I've kept in touch with through Facebook, and I call them my sourdough friends. I'm not an expert, but we like exchanging recipes and ideas. So I absolutely love this idea. I have always believed that food as a whole, and definitely sourdough, brings people together. It builds community, and it builds, a commonality between us if we're interested in sourdough. And so here's Stephanie making friends on Facebook because she shared her starter with them. So that's really great idea. And then Sourdough Mama Denise said she's going to give her starter to her egg guy. So I'm assuming that she gets eggs from a local neighbor or a friend who has hens in his backyard. And she said she's going to give him starter, and she said she thinks that he would love it. So that's a neat idea. Just a random, like, thoughtful gift. Hey, I was thinking of you. I thought you might be interested in this. So gifting sourdough bread. Let's talk about that a little bit here. So it's always a really nice idea to give bread. I mean, who doesn't love bread? Recently, I had my kids at Target right before we went to their swimming lessons, and they passed this ridiculous box of like red, white, and blue cookies, like sugar cookies. And they grabbed the box and they said, oh, I want to give this to our swimming teacher, Miss Morgan. And I said, okay, well, sure, that's a really nice idea. Let's get them for her. And then I found out that she mostly eats paleo. But then she said, but I hear you make sourdough bread, and I would definitely eat sourdough, like basically, hint, hint. So I took her hint and I made her some bread, and we took it the next week, and she was so excited. And I guess she sat down with her friends and they cut it up and they ate it together. Like, what a beautiful image. I just love that. And so you really can't go wrong with gifting sourdough, but apparently you can go wrong with gifting Target sugar cookies. So just in case you needed to know that information. So literally anyone you can give bread to. Like you could wrap it up and give it to your mailman as a thank you. Just pass it to him as he's giving you your mail. I have mailed sourdough as a small little side note. This was about 3 years ago, and it was expensive then. And I can't imagine how expensive it is now, because I just left the UPS store 2 days ago and I spent over $100 shipping 2 packages. I was completely in shock, and he said it's because of the gas prices. So not sure I would recommend mailing sourdough right now, but I've given it to neighbors. I've given it to friends, obviously their swimming teacher. And we had a neighbor whose spouse recently passed away. And so I took over a loaf of bread because I knew she had family around. And I thought, what's nicer than sitting down with some fresh bread and just being with your family in that time. So they said that they really appreciated that. So that's a nice, thoughtful idea too. If you know of anybody going through anything, a new mom who just had a baby, she would love that. I can speak from experience that she could just lay in bed and eat a slice of sourdough as she's nursing this new baby. So that's a nice idea. Just anybody who's maybe had surgery, broke a leg, anything like that. And there are tons of ways to give sourdough bread. You can make it really, really beautiful. So I'll have links in the show notes to some bags that you can gift with. They're like brown kind of papery bags with a clear plastic window. And then you fold them over and they come with stickers that says handmade for you or something like that. Handmade with love or something. And they're really, really sweet. I have some right now. I like them. And they're large too. So if you like to make large loaves, they fit large loaves really nicely. Another idea that we've always done before I got these bags is to wrap them in parchment and tie it with twine. And that looks really nice. Basically what I do is I lay out a big can I think of words today? A big length of parchment paper. And I put the bread on it face down, and I fold over the ends over the bottom, and then I'll put down another length, and I just rotate the bread, 90 degrees, and I wrap the other side. And I have to have my husband help me with this. I need the extra hands. So he holds it down. I pull the edges over, and then he holds it, and then I slide some twine underneath and wrap it on the bottom so it comes around the top, and then I do a nice bow. That was a really poor description, but hopefully you can visualize what I'm talking about. That's a nice idea because most people have some kind of string or twine or ribbon in their house, and most of us have parchment paper. So another good idea too is Debbie said that she uses the large lunch bags from Target. So the paper bags that we all used to take our lunches into school. She said she uses the large ones, and she said, I slide the boule or batard in and fold it down and fasten it with a sticker and then tie it up with twine. And she said she gets 150 bags for a couple bucks, and she gets her twine at the dollar store. And so because Sourdough Mamas are so great, she shared that link with us. So I will have the link to those Target bags in the show notes as well. You can find them directly, and you know that they work, that you're not going to take a guess on the size, because just looking at them, they look like regular lunch bags, but she assures us, no, they're large and the whole bread will fit inside. A couple more ideas is that Melissa uses these really nice cotton bags. So she said, I found cotton bags locally, but I've considered ordering these. And she gave a link. Again, you'll find that in the show notes, to these wholesale cotton tote bags. And she said, I like having a more reusable option, and most people actually return them. So that's a nice idea for a more sustainable option to do the wholesale cotton tote bags. Another idea is to buy bandanas and wash them and use them freshly washed, and just literally put the bread on and pull the corners up and tie them. That would be a really, really pretty way to gift some sourdough. And I know Hobby Lobby sells those for 99 cents because I buy them for my dog. I'm sure you can buy them at 100 other places too. Hobby Lobby has some really cool designs though. If you have one locally, I would pop in and check them out. Another idea that another sourdough mama said is that her friend embroiders the word bread on a linen tea towel and wraps the bread in that when gifting. with a really pretty ribbon. And so obviously you would need to know how to embroider or have like a sewing machine that can embroider. But even wrapping it in a really nice tea towel with a ribbon would be a really nice gesture, because again, that's reusable. And so, you know, it's all about the level that you're comfortable with. Sometimes, you know, I've just put a loaf of bread in a Whole Foods bag before and passed them this paper bag. I don't love the idea of gifting it in like a plastic grocery bag. For some reason, the paper just seems, I don't know, a bit more like classy almost. But of course, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. If you have your loaf wrapped in a Target bag, then, you know, it's safe from air and it's not going to get stale before you give it to them. So that's also fine. So literally it's like whatever works for you, whatever really makes you excited, whatever you think is beautiful is what you should do. So again, the links to all those things are in the show notes. And here's another nice option just to kind of wrap up our conversation about gifting sourdough and starter, is that you can gift it with a really nice olive oil and balsamic vinegar. So that's another option. Instead of, you know, obviously getting sourdough bread is a huge gift in and of itself. But if you're looking to kind of amp it up, maybe add something else, if it's a special occasion, grab a nice bottle of olive oil and a nice balsamic vinegar. Sometimes you can find like kits that come with small dishes. We received one once, actually. This is why I know this. And we still use the dishes all the time. It came with a bottle of olive oil in a nice gift box. It came with a bottle of olive oil and a bottle of balsamic vinegar and these really shallow square dishes. And so that gift box combined with a loaf of sourdough bread would like blow somebody's mind. I think that would be so nice. Or you could include a small jar of local jam that you grab from the farmer's market, anything like that that you could add to the bread. I think people would really appreciate. And so my final thought is to always tell people how to cut the sourdough and how to store it. A lot of people don't realize, and perhaps somebody out there listening doesn't realize this either, but the best way to cut sourdough is straight through the middle, which seems bizarre, but you cut straight through the middle, and then you're going to turn one of those halves up like on the cut side. So it's cut side down, so that is protected from becoming stale. And then you're going to cut from the middle toward the edge of the other half. So kind of the reason you do it this way that I found is best is because you, first of all, you get the good pieces first, right? You get the really nice, fresh, big pieces while the bread is still fresh. And also that way it's easier to store as well, because it makes it into smaller pieces. And frankly, if you're cutting half a loaf of sourdough, there's not too many slices in that. So it doesn't really last that long, the half. So you have this other half, which is still fresh. That's exactly how I store it. The first day or two after I make sourdough bread, I store it just on the cutting board, cut side down, literally with the bread knife on the cutting board. And it's just there in like a giant pile of crumbs on my counter. It's really, really classy. But that's how we do it. And it's just easy. It makes the sourdough accessible. You don't have to go hunting for it. It's already on a messy cutting board, so you don't mind making a mess. You know, I just found that it works best for us. And then after a couple of days, we take that sourdough bread and we put it into a gallon Ziploc bag. And I've experimented with like cotton bags, grocery bags, and what's the other thing that I used? Oh, the paper gift bags, actually, that I gift my sourdough in. I tried storing it in all those things, and none of them really worked as well as the Ziploc bags. And here's why. What I love with the Ziploc bags is that after 2 days of sitting out on the counter, it does get, obviously it's bread. It gets a little bit stale, but I wouldn't call it stale. The crust just gets more crunchy. And so when you're cutting through it, you can definitely feel that. And as I'm cutting, I can just kind of tell that after 2 days, it needs to soften. And so putting it into a gallon Ziploc bag and sealing it completely will soften that crust. So that's another tip for you, actually. If you have a really crunchy crust, make sure your bread is completely cooled and put it into a Ziploc bag, and it'll soften that crust for you. So that's what you can tell people. That's how you slice it, and that's how you store it. They could also slice the whole loaf, put it in a Ziploc bag, and put it in the freezer. And then they just pull out one piece as they need it. That's especially good for if you're just giving it to somebody who lives alone or someone that doesn't maybe eat a ton of bread. That's a nice idea. So give them those ideas as you're giving them the bread. That's really thoughtful too. You're giving them information. that's going to make their experience with your bread even better. So just a couple more final thoughts there for you. So for your homework, let's make somebody's day and go gift them the gift of sourdough. Give them some bread, make them a couple of loaves, make them one loaf, include in some ingredients that you think that they might love, or give them the starter if you think that they're interested in that. You can send them over to leavenly.com, of course, and they can find the sourdough beginners kit, which is a great way for beginner bakers to start making sourdough. And don't forget those free downloads too over in the show notes. So take advantage of those, print them out, give them to your friends as you're giving your sourdough and your starter. And as a final thought, if you love the podcast, if you find that it's helpful, and if you are, fully taking advantage of this free information, head over to leavenly.com/thanks and take any contribution that you might want to send. I really appreciate any donation, any gift that you'd like to send over. Again, we don't have ads or sponsors on this podcast, so it might be hard. I know you're probably maybe out running or driving in the car, but if you think of it, head to leavenly.com/thanks and send us over a thank you. We would so appreciate that. And so with that said, go out and give the gift of sourdough bread this week. Happy baking, everybody.